We've all been there, procrastinating, overthinking, messing things up just when things are about to go right. But why? Why do we do this to ourselves?
Self-sabotage isn't just about messing up the big opportunities in your life. It is in the small things that we do too, like ghosting someone that you really, really like, not applying for your dream job, or ignoring your gut instincts, or just procrastinating, or being a perfectionist. The list is really endless.
Yeah.
So, so Prachi, do
So
you find yourself doing this?
I recently realized that I self-sabotage when my anxiety shoots up due to uncertainty. I hate uncertainty. And then I'm very quick to quit something which I know has worked in the past. I know it will work. But then now, right now, just because in this moment I don't know if it is going to work, I will find myself some rationalization, some justification on why it's a good idea to quit, and I just pull out. What do you do? Do you do this?
Oh, yeah. So my self-sabotage mechanism for many years was perfectionism.
Ah,
Wanting to be perfect. Everything should be perfect. I have an idea in my mind about how this particular thing should look and feel. And if it's not like that, I would tell myself, oh, this is not for me. Or if it's taking too much time and I started and I think that's not unfolding the way I want it to, I would leave it. But I'm also that's also the reason why I started on the journey of mindfulness, because I realized that this really was stopping me from taking up so many new opportunities because I wanted to be that vision that I had in my mind. And that in itself was stopping me from taking the first step. So, yeah, perfectionism is the one thing that I need to catch.
I think this is going to stop a lot of people in their tracks because I don't think anybody thinks of perfectionism as self-sabotage.
Yeah.
So you've just given people a lot to think about. So like what do you think self-sabotage looks like in daily life? Like how does it show up in relationships, careers, friendships, even in our own thoughts?
So I'm going to talk about daily life, and maybe a little bit of that will overflow into careers. And I'm going to bounce back to you to talk about relationships because that's what is your forte, and I wouldn't want to take that from you. So some of the common ways I think in which self-sabotage works in daily life. One important one is procrastination. Delaying your important task, even when you know that they matter, and making excuses like I work better under pressure, and just adding to your stress and yet believing that I work under pressure. So that's one of the ways in which we can self sabotage. Another is perfectionism, which I have already laid down as a great example of it. And that's another way in which we can do that. There's also negative self talk.
Mhm.
It's saying things like, oh, I'm not good enough, or I always mess it up. And also internalizing our past failures and making them a part of our identity, like believing that this is who I am.
Yeah.
Another thing is the fear of success.
Mhm.
So choosing comfort over growth, even when we know that change is necessary and important, like avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding challenges, or even new experiences.
Mhm.
And another way in which we also self sabotage is numbing, that I find a lot in people nowadays, because using food, alcohol, social media, or other distractions, to
Yeah.
avoid feeling certain emotions, binge watching, scrolling endlessly, or just staying super busy because you
True.
don't want to feel. And
Yeah.
then there is, of course, the imposter syndrome, feeling like you don't deserve success. And somebody will someday find out very soon that this I'm not deserving enough. And then for that reason, downplaying your achievements and dismissing compliments and all of those things. So these are, I think, some of the common ways in which we find self-sabotage in daily life. And now tell me, what are the ways in which we find them in relationships?
But dismissing compliments, I agree with you. I mean, I think that's just
No,
uh,
right? It's a big one in relationships,
big
I think.
one,
Yeah.
absolutely big one. I see this so many times. It's like somebody tells you, "Oh wow, I really like the top you're wearing. Oh, this old thing. Oh, this is really old. It's okay, Or like they feel like they have to immediately compliment someone back or say
Yeah.
something nice about them. So, and such subtle forms that we don't even connect with self-sabotage, right?
Mm.
I'm so glad that we are talking about this today. When it comes to relationships, I think the biggest form of self-sabotage that I see is people seeking connection, but engaging in actions that create more distance. Like,
Mm.
using blaming or shaming language to tell your partner that you would like to spend more time together. That's not attractive for anyone, right?
Yeah.
If you want to spend more time together, you have to ask for it, like how you would ask for anything, make a request for anything. But attacking your partner for it actually drives them further away. The other pattern that I see is chasing chaos and finding peace boring. Peaceful phases actually start up a feeling of, like just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then
Mm.
people go looking for disruption. They're like, itni shanti hai, like there has to be something which is about to go wrong. And when nothing goes wrong, then you want to like do something to just like move it along, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, people who've been raised on chaos find peace boring. Actually, they don't
Mm.
even recognize peace, like it feels threatening to them. So
Mm.
that's another form of self-sabotage that I see like in interpersonal relations. And like you were saying, self-talk, negative self-talk, uh,
Mm.
self-sabotage there also shows up again, like as gaslighting ourselves.
Yeah.
We can be our biggest gaslighters.
Of course.
We will, always trust our critic more than the motivator inside,
Yeah.
because the motivator inside is always like, oh, I'm just telling myself this to make myself feel better, but the reality
Mm.
is
Is this? Yeah.
different. And if you look at all of these scenarios, I think shame is the common denominator. Whether we are shaming ourselves or we are shaming another person and then driving them away,
Mm.
and then just like creating situations which don't serve us.
Mm.
That makes me think that shame creates the biggest opportunity for self-sabotage.
Mm. So, from what you were talking about, so is it really that when people self-sabotage when things are really going too well in the relationship? सही सही है, तो अब मैं क्या ऐसा करूं कि,
हाँ,
it
फिर
should.
मजा नहीं आ रहा ना.
हाँ, exactly. It's not like fiery enough, and then
Exactly, like there's no
yeah.
passion, no intensity, and
Mm.
oh my God, like if this is too smooth, then something must be wrong. Like if
Yeah.
we are fighting, then does he not love me enough? Or if she's not,
Validation.
yeah, if she's not making my life miserable, then like does she even think of herself as my partner? So I have to do something. I was
Yeah.
just like watching this series that
Real. Okay.
no, the series that I'm very fond of called Love is
Yeah.
Blind.
Ah. Oh yeah.
Because it gives me a lot of relationship-based insights. I mean, we all know reality shows are a little scripted, but I still pick up like a lot of nuances. And there's this
Mm.
one person in the latest season who you can tell right from the beginning is he has some kind of an internal thing where he doesn't believe that he is worthy of love,
Okay. Mm.
but he never outrightly like says it like that.
Mm.
So, and there were two girls that he would finally like had a connection with, and the one he ended up choosing was the one who was the let's say, the one who was like from the beginning saying that you are my only one, right? So he chooses her,
Mm.
and now he's like, okay, he's finding reasons to figure out why she's
Right.
with him. So he's picked up from somewhere that like she was dating someone before she came into the show and all of that. So now he's just poking and poking on that and continuously saying, "But I don't understand. I don't understand why if you were with someone 6 months ago, why would you be with me? Like why do you want to be with me?" And she's saying that makes no sense.
No
Like can
sense.
you not? I broke it up with that person. I was in a casual relationship. It was not even a relationship. Like even my friends didn't know about him and all.
Mm.
And when I came onto the show, I came with a certain goal in mind, right? Like I wanted to
Yeah.
find a partner and I fell in love with you. Why is
Mm.
that so hard for you to believe? But he's just like continuously picking fight because he's saying, no, but I don't believe this. Like, why would you fall for me? And I feel like that's his own sabotage coming forward. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. And I think what you were talking about, the fact that, if she's not doing like a collation in my life, does she even love me? And I see so many reels on this, right? And then so many conversations around that she needs to be calling you 10x times, doubting you, fighting with you, shouting at you, possessive about you. And if she's not any of this, but does she really love you? So I mean, it's a form of self-sabotage, and I think a lot of people do it. That's why those reels are so popular, of course.
Absolutely so popular, so relatable, right?
Yeah, it is indeed.
So, but you
Yes.
know what? I also I noticed that a lot of times when this happens, people will immediately go into this mode like, oh God, like this always happens to me, like I'm jinxed or like I have
Hmm.
bad luck, or they will immediately like blame it on something else rather than
Hmm.
like looking inward.
Hmm.
So why do you think self-sabotage is often mistaken for bad luck or external circumstances?
Yeah. So because I think even though we might not think very highly about ourselves in a situation like self-sabotage, that's where it comes from. Lack of self-confidence and assurance. But there's also the ego, which is there in everyone, right? So, and the ego really thrives on the fact that, oh, it's not me, it's someone else. It really thrives on that naturally. So the primary reasons why this really could be, I think, is one, the lack of self-awareness. We don't even know that we are self-sabotaging. So if you're not aware, and I think if you ask me a question on any of these things as to what is the first step towards knowing something, it's always going to be that awareness. It's always is the answer. So a lot of people don't have that awareness. Also, the mind's resistance to discomfort. And we don't want to be in a situation which is uncomfortable, even though we know that, this is important for me. So instead, we just say that, oh, it's just the way things are. I mean, it's not on me to step out of my comfort zone, but it's just, the way things are. And so I'm here and it's not my doing. Also, externalizing responsibility is the easiest thing to do. We
Yeah,
do that
yeah.
so much. Anything goes wrong in our life, or that person did that to me. My workplace is not great. My boss is not the right boss, and all of those things. These are all externalizing responsibility because we always have a part to play in everything.
And I think admitting that would like also mean admitting that I need to change, and change is
Yeah,
always very uncomfortable.
exactly. And that's where comes the resistance to the discomfort,
Yeah.
which I said, before this one. And then I think the final thing is the brain's confirmation bias. If
Mm.
we really believe that we are unlucky or that success doesn't come to us and is out of our reach, our brain will find every reason possible to confirm that and say that, yes, you are unlucky. And then we will ignore our own self sabotaging behavior, our own patterns, and then focus on the external things. Because primarily, I think at the crux of all of it, it's always easy to put the blame on someone else and
Yeah.
wash our hands off that. Right. And but I've also seen that when people take up radical responsibility, the ownership, the most remarkable changes happen then. And it's
True.
really is possible to move past anything and everything, all of these patterns. But it really has to be someone saying that, this is my responsibility.
True.
And like we said at the beginning, we are the ones who stop ourselves. We are the only ones who are capable of stopping ourselves. Forget
Yeah.
about, anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Prachi, what do you think is the psychology behind this? Is it really, a fear of success or a fear of failure? Where's all this coming from?
I think partly it can be both.
Mm,
And I mean both are equally deadly. Actually, we talk a lot about fear of failure. We don't
mm,
talk enough about fear of success.
mm,
And actually, it's very hard to distinguish between the two as well. Like one
mm.
can be disguised as the other until you are like just really digging deep.
Yeah.
But if you go into the subtleties, fear of success has to do with being in the spotlight, being really seen, and not feeling capable enough to handle the perceived weight of expectations that will be put on the person after success. कि अब मैंने
Mm,
यहाँ तक कर लिया है तो now I can't afford to slip back. And if I slip back, the burden of everybody else's expectations is going to be just too much, and I won't be able to take the shame related to it.
mm.
I think this might connect with the perfectionism aspect that you were also talking about
Yeah.
earlier, right?
Mm,
That uh, either I'm perfect or I'm nothing at all.
yeah.
And then fear of failure, on the other hand, it keeps us frozen because the imaginary failure in the future feels so overwhelming that you don't even want to try because you're like, what's the point even? I'm going to reach there eventually.
Mm.
then shame and ridicule is going to come my way. And that idea of just like that overbearing shame and ridicule just traps us in immobility. So, but whether it is fear of success, whether it is fear of failure, whether it is perfectionism, uh, in any of the scenarios that we've discussed today where self-sabotage shows up, I think if we talk about the psychology, what is really happening underneath all of these scenarios is that we are telling ourselves a story which is actually often far removed from reality. And then we choose to trust that story instead of
Mm.
testing for contrary evidence. Because I don't know, maybe testing for evidence takes more effort, or is just a familiar pattern to just trust the story and the narrative that we told ourselves, and maybe somebody else told it to us when we were growing up. And it just does all this damage, right? So, I mean, right? Like we've just been talking last week about this one of such vicious cycles that I was caught up
Yes.
in last week, right?
Yeah.
But I'm
Yeah.
like suddenly questioning my entire relationship because of a random story I was telling myself, which had
Exactly.
no basis in reality. And I was just fearing being abandoned and then completely spiraling. And then what did I do? I was really, really trying to hold myself back. And I still ended up texting my partner for reassurance, which like completely caught him off guard because nothing had happened.
Exactly.
But like, thank God, he's like very well acquainted with this self-sabotaging part of mine that shows up sometimes, and he loves it nonetheless. Otherwise, I would have stirred up a pot of all kinds of craziness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but like that's what happens, right? Like this
Exactly.
story just triggers, and
Mm.
you just play a part in that story as if you have no agency, and
Yeah.
that's probably the psychology really behind that.
Yeah. And it's so subtle and so, I mean, just because you're aware,
Mm.
you could, pick that up in yourself,
Yeah.
and you were doing the work, and you decided that you want to speak to someone, and also, reaching out to your partner in a so-called, structured manner, as to seek assurance, not in a way that you're lashing out at him and projecting it on him. But for people who are not aware,
Mm.
it could be just the most normal way, right? And it could just blow up so much, and you wouldn't even know what triggered and what started it.
And I mean,
So,
like you won't know, and also you would think that this is right, like this
mm,
is true.
mm,
So, yeah.
yeah. And do you think that this is especially more relevant to women, and in terms of self-sabotage, do we tend to get into this pattern more than men? Is there a gender, kind
I
of?
think there's a difference in the way it manifests.
Hmm.
Uh, and maybe this has something to do with the whole feminine and masculine energy that we've discussed in another
Yeah.
episode. But I feel like for men, the self-sabotage is more in the form of performance disruptions in one
Hmm.
way or another.
Hmm.
It could be a work-related performance disruption. It could be a bedroom-related performance disruption.
Hmm.
Yeah, or it could be like feeling like I'm not being enough of a provider and then doing
Yeah.
something completely like out of character.
Hmm.
For men, I feel like it shows up like those things. And for women, it probably manifests like how it did for me, right? Like mostly in relationship and emotional context.
Yeah.
So women will like when they are sabotaging, they will
Hmm.
usually stir up a lot of emotional storm
Yeah.
within themselves and in the relationships that they have. And it
Hmm.
can be any relationship, doesn't even have to be romantic, right? Like it can be
Yeah.
or siblings or whatever. But
Hmm.
it's very stormy, like emotionally
Yeah.
for women. I feel like that's the difference. And uh, I guess maybe cultures also probably make a
Yeah,
difference.
they
What do you
do. Yeah. And I think also the way it manifests in terms of actions
think?
for men, I think they get on a proving a point mode.
Yeah, yeah,
And women, on the other hand, get onto a very defensive or feeling even lesser about themselves, and they get
yeah.
into
Or
a
like
shell
just
kind
see
of
me and
more.
hear me and see
Yeah.
hear me.
Yeah. And yet be kind of keep drawing away and inward and
Mm.
into their own, like disconnect from people, their friends and stuff like that, and just get into that mode of I'm not good enough kind of thing, though both the things stem from feeling not good enough at certain areas. But
Yeah.
I think the way it's kind of manifests in action is sort of different for men and women, more or less. I'm not
True.
saying it's the same for everyone, but primarily that's what we really see. So
Yeah.
coming from there, then, do you think that self sabotage is really a form of self protection? Because there's something in us that's feeling vulnerable,
Mm.
and we kind of make stories around it to kind of not feel it or feel protected or safe. And if that is so, then how really?
Yeah, I think it is. And I mean, let's take an example of
Hmm.
somebody who breaks up with their partners if they start to perceive that, okay, they might be breaking up with me. They might be like thinking about breaking up with me. So before they can do it, let me do it.
Hmm.
Right? Let's take this example. And this is like, I think one of the commonest examples that we can have, right?
Hmm.
Looking at this looks like protection, right? It's like, okay, I'm trying to save myself.
Hmm.
How factual it is, that's irrelevant in that moment, right? Because
Yeah.
what you are perceiving as rejection or abandonment may not
Hmm.
actually be that. But if you've
Yeah.
not had the opportunity to recognize healthy boundaries or like just healthy no, then it will feel like rejection. तो
Hmm.
वो एक अलग चीज होगी. But I think we probably need to look at this from an inner child lens. I think
Hmm. Hmm.
that these parts of us that self-sabotage are like children.
Hmm.
They are those younger parts of us which did not really have a lot of control or, agency even, or even vision or tools for that matter, right? Like
Yeah.
as a child, you have very limited resources that you can tap into
Hmm.
uh, to protect yourself or to like take a different path. And all of these children, like, they get trapped inside of us. And when something like this happens, this child is so vehement, and it's so like wants to be heard so badly and throws such a bad tantrum, let's say,
Hmm.
inside,
Yeah. Yeah.
that we just like blend with it. And
Hmm.
once we blend with it, that's who we become.
Yeah.
There's this modality in therapy called internal family systems that works a lot with parts of us
Hmm.
and a lot of parts of children. So it says something very beautiful where if you want to learn how to segregate from this response or like just create a little bit distance, it says in one line that you have to learn how to speak for the part rather
Hmm.
than speak from the part.
But yeah, that's so beautiful and so deep and so
Yeah,
meaningful,
and
right?
I think
Yeah.
it's fantastic. Just if we can
Yeah.
just remember this one line also,
Hmm.
it can make a tremendous difference in the way we communicate.
Yeah.
And
And the way, yeah, and what we aim to achieve from there,
yeah,
right? I mean, it's no more about protection, it's about growth. It's about
mm,
actually telling that inner child that all the ways in which he or she felt were unsafe zones. Now there's someone who's going to take care of that
yeah,
and navigate that, because there has experience that's come through in years. There's wisdom, and most importantly, there is care, which is
yeah,
not supposed to come from someone else, but you yourself are ready to offer that to yourself. And I think that's so beautiful.
yeah. It's absolutely amazing. And a while ago, you were talking about imposter syndrome also as a form of
Yeah.
self-sabotage, right?
Yeah.
How does that like show up?
So it's very
Because
interesting.
that's something, I think that's something that a lot of people
Talk about
like it perks their ears off because we hear this so much
so
nowadays.
much, so much. And I'm not even sure that, all of us really feel it that way, but, it's like one of those terms which is really, really used quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's primarily when you feel like a fraud,
Mm.
right? When you feel like you don't deserve success and you've just got it by fluke, and you start acting in ways that you reinforce this fear,
Mm.
and that's self-sabotage. So you
Mm.
hesitate, you overthink, you procrastinate, and these are the ways in which it kind of manifests in your action. And you begin to really downplay your own achievements, and you also avoid opportunities that come to your way, and you are constantly seeking for validation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when things you haven't planned and they just happen to you, and sometimes because over a period of time things have compounded and they're going to lead towards an opportunity to you, and it's because of the work that you've done. But the first thing that comes to your mind is that, what is the proof that I'm
Yeah.
deserving? And you just forget about all the work that you've put in for years together, all the growth that you just become incapable of seeing that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very vicious cycle, because the doubt then leads to inaction. Then action will lead to missed opportunities, and the missed opportunities will again reinforce the doubt that I'm
Yeah.
not growing. And so that just keeps on happening. So the only way to, I think, overcome this really is to catch yourself in the act. And again, awareness.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear a voice inside of you saying that, oh, you're not ready, or you don't belong, or you're not capable, it is not for you, we have to recognize it for what it is. Is it fear,
Mm-hmm.
or is it really the truth? And we have to tell ourselves that this is fear, not the truth.
And when you say it like that, I mean, I think it connects to the previous point that we were discussing. But this also sounds
Hmm.
like a little child using avoidance for protection, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because
I
you don't
don't
want to
know.
get,
Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to meet there, so I might as well pull myself back, like not even step
yeah,
into the spotlight.
yeah, because if I'm questioned for anything,
Yeah,
because we are all a work in progress.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, just because you talk relationships or I talk mindfulness, we don't know that we are not encyclopedias of it, right? We're still
Mhm.
learning and growing. We might know more than some others, but we also might know less than some others. And that's just the way life is. And we
Yeah,
have to accept that, because confidence isn't something, you wait for. The one day you're going to feel confident.
yeah.
It is something that you have to build by showing up for what is uncomfortable, but necessary for your growth. And that's the only way to overcome when it comes to feeling like an imposter. So that's about the imposter syndrome. But how do you feel that, how do you know if you're self sabotaging versus when you are genuinely making a good decision or a wise decision or a decision that's going to keep you safe? How do you find that difference?
Mm. Okay, so I guess now we are moving towards breaking the cycle. Like, how do we
Yeah.
break this self
Yeah.
cycle?
Yeah.
That's what we are now moving to.
Hmm.
Um, I think there are some ways to know that which will help you like differentiate between a good decision or like a self-sabotage. Um, First, I think a good decision feels stable,
Hmm.
whereas self-sabotage like oscillates between guilt and shame and self-doubt.
Hmm.
Second, I think self-sabotage is always a repetitive pattern.
Hmm.
No matter how much you are rationalizing it in the moment, this has to be something that you have done before and regretted. So
Hmm.
if you just take a moment and like look at your history in that moment, and if this is something you've done, you can tell yourself the, oh, but then this is a different case, and this is a different factor, or this is a different person. But
Hmm.
look at the outcome or look at the dynamics. And
Hmm.
if this is a dynamic that you have created before and then regretted, it's probably self-sabotaging, not a decision as such.
Yeah.
Then self-sabotage is emotional, very emotional in nature, but a good decision will always follow logic and evidence.
Hmm.
This is something I tell so many of my clients that if you're trying to take a decision, no matter what the aspect of life is, always follow logic and evidence. Do not make decisions on emotional reasoning.
Hmm.
You cannot trust emotional reasoning for decision making. And that's where self-sabotage also gets a like its foot in the door, because
Yeah.
emotions are just to be felt, they're not to be acted upon.
Exactly.
And finally, I think and we were talking about this, I think, in our intuition episode as well.
Hmm.
A good decision feels calm, it brings calm. Self-sabotage feels like pressure and urgency. If you're like, oh, I have to do this right away, otherwise, like I feel like my heart is going to burst,
First.
you're probably going to do something self-sabotaging. But
Yeah.
good decision will always bring a sense of calm. It may bring sadness
Hmm.
sometimes, or it may bring a sense of loss,
Yeah.
but it will not bring pressure and urgency. It'll always bring Calmness.
Yeah, the sense of peace.
Yeah, but now that we've spoken about, like this difference of how to tell, like whether you're making a good decision or you're
Hmm.
sabotaging, and because you work with mindfulness and awareness, what do you think would be some first steps to identifying one's self-sabotage triggers? And then how can someone start sort of rewiring their brain to stop
So I think as you did talk about most of it, but
it?
you
Mm.
know, noticing your patterns is really the first thing. Awareness, like my standard answer to every time there is a question on what should be done to identify something, always awareness. That's
Yeah.
really is the first thing because you have to
But
pay
can you like
attention.
elaborate on the awareness?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So paying attention to where do you consistently get stuck?
Okay.
All right. So do you procrastinate? Do you overthink? Or do you quit when things get good? Is this a pattern?
What is your
So,
pattern
yeah,
within the
that is your
pattern?
pattern within the pattern. So, notice that pattern. Really pause and think. Then, every time you start getting into this decision, take a moment, pause and think, am I following a pattern? Do I tend to do this very regularly?
Mm.
And then also identify the emotion.
Mm.
What feeling drives you towards self sabotage? Fear of failure? Is it a fear of success? Not feeling good enough? Seeking validation? These could be the various feelings that might come up. And also listen to your self talk.
Mm.
No, catch that inner dialogue. What excuses do you make? What do you
Mm.
tell yourself? What limiting beliefs are really running the show?
Mm.
That I always mess up, that I'm not worthy because somebody sometime had told that you're not worthy. So all of these self-talk that really runs the show for you. So you're not really running the show in your true authentic self. And that is an important thing. Now, mindfulness really helps you to catch self-sabotage in real time because
Mm.
mindfulness is presence. So it's
Yeah.
going to ask you to pause and reflect. And in the moment when it's actually occurring, you're able to notice it, and you then have the choice of choosing differently. First choice is that not to act from that, and then comes the choice of actually rewiring and shifting your mindset. But the first choice is that, okay, I see this, I don't have to act from it, because when you will identify the pattern can you really break it, and you can only break it once you choose to pause and create some distance. So one first way is to pause and observe. So instead of reacting automatically, take a mindful pause. Ask yourself, is this action helping me or is it hurting me? For example, if you decline a big opportunity,
Mm.
out of fear,
Mm.
and instead of just declining it, you pause and you take a deep breath and you ask yourself, am I saying no because I'm unprepared, or am I saying no because I'm scared?
Mm.
So these questions that you ask yourself can really lead to a shift in how your mind starts to see things. You're giving the mind the opportunity to see something differently. Then also the ability to challenge the narrative. Replace your limiting beliefs with empowering ones. Like, for example, I'm not ready. And instead of saying that, say that I'm learning and growing. For example, if you catch yourself thinking, I'm not leadership material, then instead of saying that, reframe it that every leader was once, a person who started somewhere. Today, I am that person. I'm starting this, I'm taking the first step. And then taking micro actions. Because, like I said earlier as well, that confidence isn't something that's just going to arrive, it's built over small steps. So if you're terrified of speaking in public and that stops you, look at a small group and start speaking there. And I think the most important thing is self compassion. You really need to practice that. If you slip up in a new habit, don't go beating yourself up. Instead, say that, okay, one day doesn't define who I am. I
Mm.
have an opportunity of coming back to this again. And I think those are really the important ways in which we can kind of rewire the mind. It's one step at a time. You very consciously do it. But as you keep doing it, it kind of settles back down and it becomes the way your mind thinks.
Are
I do
there
believe that.
are there any body-based actions that somebody can take? Because sometimes, you're so caught up in the moment that your thoughts are not a good place to go to, right?
Yeah.
Is there something that people can do through their body?
So body breath connection, I think, is the most accessible way. instead of really getting into a meditative zone, come into presence. The two things that are always in the present moment is your breath and your body. And if you can bring your awareness to the felt sense of the breath in your body, expansion of your chest, feeling the temperature of the air that moves in through your nostrils. It's cooler when it comes out, it's warmer. All noticing all these subtle things can make a world of a difference. Also, placing your hand at your heart or on your belly to feel your breath or your body is a great way of doing that. And actually holding yourself, and that's where the compassion part comes in. Holding
Yeah.
yourself like you would hold a child with that much care and that affection can make a world of a difference. And this is something that I think everybody should practice irrespective, because there's just such a compassion filled act that you do for yourself when you hold yourself with that tenderness. Then you just automatically feel okay,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I
and
love
that,
doing this kind of a, tapping gesture on
yeah,
my arms. It feels
it
amazing.
feels amazing. And also just placing your hand here and just kind of tapping
Yeah.
yourself, or just doing this, or just giving yourself a nice belly rub, when you're
Mm,
feeling butterflies in your belly or you're feeling uneasy, just giving yourself a belly rub, or just doing this. These kind of things are just so soothing. And we do
true.
this to someone, a friend, right? We would do this to a friend, we do this to a child. Why
Yeah,
don't we do it for ourselves?
true.
And yeah, I do think these are great ways of coming into your body and in your breath and the present moment.
Mm. One more thing I've heard often is something called
Hmm.
accountability partners.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people work with them, and I believe there are apps and platforms and websites where you can sign up for accountability
Yeah.
partners.
Yeah.
So, do you think that really works? What do you think?
It works. It works, but again, it's about choosing the right kind of accountability partner as well. So as coach as well, I do work with a lot of people. I mean, it's part of the whole built-in model that I am an
Right.
accountability partner for them. And so accountability partners act as your mirror. They reflect back the patterns that you might have and you might not be able to see yourself. And they help you to identify that. So for example, when self-doubt creeps in and you start making excuses, an accountability partner will remind you that, this was your goal and hold you to your commitments. But the key thing in this is that you choose someone who will challenge you with compassion. And that's the most
I
important
was just
thing.
going to ask that would have
Yeah.
been my next question. How does one go about finding an account? Like, what is it
Yeah.
something that people should keep in mind when looking for one?
Definitely someone who challenges you with compassion and isn't someone who just nods along with you.
Okay.
That's not an accountability partner. They have to be able to challenge you in a way that is oriented towards your growth.
Mhm.
And a great accountability partner is not just someone who will check in with you, but they will also call you out. They will ask you the right kind of questions, and they'll
Right.
stay help you stay mindful about your actions. And over time, the idea is that external accountability rewires into your internal accountability. It kind of
Mhm.
creates that pattern, those questioning in your own mind, and that's how it will break the cycle of self-sabotage. And that's why it's very, very, very important to choose the right accountability partner, someone who knows how to do this work, because otherwise it'll just be someone who will keep buying your excuses and you're not going to reach anywhere. Right?
Yeah, I guess it'll have to be someone who, if you tell them to buzz off, they don't buzz off.
They
They
don't bother. They're
stay.
like, no, but you said this. But
Yeah.
tell me, Prachi, do you think is therapy also really helpful in breaking the cycle of
Yes,
self-sabotage? Yeah.
definitely is very helpful because, like you said about accountability partners being mirrors,
Hmm.
I think therapy is a great place for reflection,
Hmm.
for introspection, and a therapist acts in two capacities. The therapist will act as a mirror when
Hmm.
something has to be reflected back just as it is.
Hmm.
And a therapist also acts as a vessel
Hmm.
to hold everything that is pouring out of you
Hmm.
without mixing it up, without shaking it, without doing anything to it. So therapy allows you to really like bring all the muck out and then very safely just like sort through it so that you can pick what works for you and then discard what doesn't serve you any longer. I
Hmm.
think like I'm describing it very, very simplistically, but at the end of the day, this is what happens, right? This is what
Yeah.
your therapist will do. They will allow and they will also deep dive in your past with you, which will help you figure out or like connect the dots that okay,
Hmm.
because I genuinely think that just telling someone to do something, no matter how effective that technique is, if you can't make that connection for this person as to what is the rationale for this technique for you,
Mm.
I don't think it works. People try it a couple of times, it doesn't work for them, and they just leave it.
Yeah.
So what therapy does is it creates that synchronization that okay, this happened, therefore this happened, and therefore today this makes sense.
Mm.
And then you can, so there's one thing, to intellectually know something, and then it's completely another thing to actually experientially absorb that knowledge, and then you can convert it into wisdom. And until you convert it into wisdom, you won't practice it.
Exactly. Yeah. It needs to
So
make
that's
sense to
what
you.
therapy helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is like the one? Do you want to add something else to this?
No, I think
No.
that's like I said, like I've really simplified it, but I
Yeah.
honestly speaking, I think in its brass tacks, like this is what therapy does.
So, tell me what has been like the one practical takeaway for you to overcome self sabotage? What do you do?
I think for me, it has been this technique called urge surfing.
Mm.
So when I get self-destructive urges, and it can come in any form, it can come because I want to just rudely tell someone off who doesn't deserve it, or I want to, finish off a bottle of wine, you know,
Mm.
or like anything. It can be anything. And whenever it hits, it's really strong.
Mm.
And I surf it. It's like a
Mm.
very, very big wave. And
Mm.
what I do is now I try to just ride with it.
Mm.
I can get wet. I
Mm.
can, this wave can look really huge and scary and feel like, oh my God, it's just going to drown me. But if I can just ride it, and I can remind myself that it is going to pass, whether I do something or I don't. So if I
Mm.
feel like having a full bottle of wine, even then this wave is going to pass if I have it. If I don't have it, then also it's going to pass. It's just that in that moment, it feels like this is how I'm going to feel forever.
Mm.
If you can just ride that thought, that has really helped me a lot. Just to hold on from impulsive action. That's really worked for me. What is
Awesome.
one thing that's worked for you?
I think mindfulness is something that's really worked for me, and that's really is my go-to.
Mhm.
And to be able to identify it, but how does that look when I practice it? Is that I have a good laugh when I see myself doing it. So it's like a dialogue with myself, and I tell myself, "Oh, there you go again." And it's just fun. It's
Mhm.
it's done in a way that it's very joyful, and it's like it's not something that I shame myself for, even when it happens now sometimes. And I'm a very action oriented person, so I like to I like discipline a lot, I like action a lot. So what I do is then I break down, because it's perfectionism which kind of moves into, then I don't take the first step itself. Then I just break it down. The first thing that I write down, what is the worst that can happen,
Right.
and what is the best that can happen. And then after written that, then I write the first step and I just give it a timeline, and I make sure that I have a journal which has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday written on it, and all the dates and everything. And in that I just write down one day one task related to that one thing that I'm not stepping into, because I want to be perfect in that, and just follow that. And every time something comes up, and I write the time and all of that. So because I'm an action oriented person, it works for me. I
Yeah.
need to not put my brains into what I'm going to do every single day. It's already there, and I'll just follow that and do it. So that's something that's helped. And I think it for me, all of that comes from mindfulness, because I'm not a person who really works very well. If I criticize myself, then I just get in the shell and I don't work well. So I
Yeah.
have to kind of,
Yeah.
you know, treat myself like a child and do that.
I can relate to that. I can totally, see that. And I think those are some really good takeaways from today's episode.
Yes.
And if you are watching us and you are listening to us, if
Mm.
you are doing something that makes no sense but feels familiar, maybe it's self-sabotage in disguise. And we would love for you to tell us your biggest self-sabotage story. You can DM us, comment here, share with a friend who needs to hear this. But we've all been there. You're not alone in this.
Yeah.
We've been there and we are sitting here and talking to you about it. Like, why don't you come and talk to us about it?
Absolutely, because the more we talk about these things, the more we normalize them. The more we normalize them, the more we don't feel the need to hide them, and we own them. And unless we really own these parts of ourselves, very difficult to work past them and to your next
Absolutely.
best version.
And when you own it, you do away with the shame. And like I said in the beginning, shame is the common denominator in self-sabotage. So if you can get rid of that, you're sorted.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Prachi, and I hope she shares the same sentiment.
Always.
Yes, I will see you guys again in the next one. Watch out for the next one, and please share, like, subscribe, and stay connected. Talk to us.
Yes, and I loved talking to you. And I wonder if anyone knows that we talk so much on our episodes and we talk so much throughout the week, the
Week,
whole
yeah,
time. And
exactly.
in
That
the
if I have to find one message from Prachi, I have to do like a big scroll on my WhatsApp, and like, where the hell did the message go?
oh my
And
God.
that's a good thing. I'm so glad for that. Take
So,
care, everyone. We'll see you
you. Bye
soon.
bye.
Bye.